Okay, John, I'm going to ask you about these stats that Richard referred to on China. I mean, how real is this? I mean, trust in the media in China. This is not just myself speaking with an interest here, but I mean, is this meaningful in any way?
So thanks, Richard and Lionel, for the invitation. I'd like to frame the response with the question, is more trust necessarily always a good indicator? So I think we can agree that if we see a low level of trust across all of the institutions in a particular geography, there's a big risk in that, because clearly it might mean that our ability to partner effectively with each other across sectors, or our ability to have efficient exchanges, could be reduced by that overall lack of trust. But on the other hand, if you see a very high level of trust, what does that mean? Well, it could mean in the Alcoa case that Klaus has done a great job, but it could also mean that, for instance, in the media context, there is hardly any choice. And therefore, if there's no choice, is it possible to have an environment where skepticism, healthy skepticism, can be developed? Obviously, in the case of China, if you've delivered double-digit income growth, GDP growth for a dozen years or more, people are inclined to give you a little bit of credit for that performance. But I do think that at the same time we have to be a little bit cautious in terms of taking large numbers, strong trust figures, and assuming that all is well when we see those figures.
Right. I mean, it's a bit more than just related. It is pretty correlated, is it not? Do you think in China, strong economic growth, in many areas rising wages, you're likely to get a high trust figure, aren't you?
Yeah, and I think that's the case, and it's interesting to contrast China with India, where you have a messy democracy.
Yeah, exactly.
You have, as a result, perhaps lower trust in government, but high trust in business. And I think one thing that's important to understand is that each and every one of us only has a certain amount of trust that we can dispense. And most of us, put a lot of that trust in family and friends, or colleagues in the workplace, or our employer. And then there's a certain amount of trust we've got left over that we allocate among government, church, trade union, brands, what have you. And I think when we look at these overall trust figures, we have to think in a more personal sense, how do we as individuals develop and allocate the trust that we have to offer. And in a sense, all of these entities, business, government, media, etc., are competing for the residue of trust that we have as citizens available to allocate after we've looked after our family, friends, and colleagues.
Thanks, John.